The 20th century saw more changes than any previous period. And for the first time, all aspects of our living, from scenes of everyday life to new technology, were recorded on film. None more so than travel. Perhaps you recall the record-breaking achievements in aviation, the steam era, or the golden age of travel by ocean liner. Electrically operated trams, like the one from which this film was shot, were first used in Southampton in 1900. They replaced the horse-drawn vehicles introduced during the 19th century. A network of tram routes connected many of the residential areas with key parts of the town, such as the docks, a significant source of work for the local people, and the town centre, with this particular route actually passing through the ancient Bar Gate. This very early clip dates from 1901 and provides a unique window on town life at the turn of the last century. Plenty of horse-drawn vehicles and cycles, but not a car in sight. And an absence of road markings, neon signs, and other hallmarks of the 21st century. In fact, this part of Southampton has changed virtually beyond recognition, due largely to redevelopment following bomb damage during the Second World War. These scenes were recorded by the Southern Counties Touring Society, just a few months before Southampton's last tram was taken out of service in December 1949. By now, the famous Guy double-decker bus was a common sight, and equally commonplace, the trolleybus was introduced as a quieter, more versatile alternative to trams by many corporations across the region. In the seaside resort of Hastings during the 1940s, the green and white Sunbeam trolleybuses of the Hastings Tramway Company provided transport for local people and visitors. They were powered by a network of overhead cables. Along the coast in Portsmouth, trolleybuses took over from trams during the mid-1930s, with a fleet of 100 vehicles. Many, like this, were made by AEC, and put into service with red livery during 1936 and 37. Parts of the system survived until July 1963, when the corporation converted to diesel buses. And in Southend-on-Sea, Essex, sporting livery of blue and white, trolleybuses were a common sight for over 3 decades. This one is another Sunbeam with a Park Royal body, which first entered service in the area during the late 1940s. The Southern Counties Touring Society, who recorded these scenes, were a group with a passion for travel and pre-war vehicles. This excursion in 1951 took them through Sussex, near Devil's Dyke, aboard a 1930 Lioness, built by Leyland. Before private car ownership became an affordable reality for most families, longer journeys often meant journeys by rail. Famous trains such as the Bournemouth Bell and the Brighton Bell provided a regular service for commuters and holidaymakers alike, linking the seaside resorts with London and locations between. And for those wishing to cross the English Channel, there was the boat train. On this occasion, in the 1930s, the route is from London Victoria through the Kent countryside to Dover and the ferry to France. First, the luggage arrived aboard its own special train. Followed by the passengers, many of whom travelled first class amid the luxury of Pullman coaches. Before the advent of the roll-on, roll-off ferry, any cars making the crossing were craned aboard and lowered below decks for stowage in the holds. The steamer Canterbury was one of several vessels operated by Southern Railway on its Dover-Calais service. The crossing took around 1 hour and 45 minutes. 25 years later, the South's railway network was under review. Main line stations were relatively safe, but other smaller branches, which often served rural communities, were under threat of closure. Under British Rail, the railway system was to be streamlined. As electrification of lines, begun in the late 1930s, continued and diesel locomotives were introduced, the steam era, it seemed, was about to end for good, and scenes like this would become nothing more than a memory. In many cases, quaint country stations in which staff took special pride, along with complete sections of track, were earmarked for closure. This is the Kent and East Sussex Railway, serving the public in 1927 at Bodiam in East Sussex. In those days, there wasn't even a level crossing, but then there were fewer vehicles on the road. The service continued into the 1950s, carrying local people and seasonal hop pickers. Passenger trains stopped running in 1954, though freight trains carried on until 1961, when the line was closed. But that's not where the story ends. A band of enthusiasts came up with the idea of reopening the line as a private preserved railway. And after much fundraising and a great deal of effort, this was achieved 13 years later. The line remains open as the Kent and East Sussex Railway, with steam-hauled trains running between Bodiam and Tenterden. Not all branch lines and the communities they served were as fortunate, however. In 1964, at Fordingbridge in Hampshire, the line and station, which provided a link with the main line at Salisbury, were closed for good, and a demolition program was begun. These scenes are the work of Jack Hood. He was a coal merchant with a yard adjacent to the station, and had a great interest in the railway. Stage by stage, he painstakingly recorded the demolition, as signal gantries were cut down, track ripped up, and sleepers recycled for use elsewhere within the railway system. By this time, private car ownership was far more widespread. The people of Fordingbridge would now have to rely on travel by road. Unlike the Bodiam-Tenterden line, trains wouldn't be running again here. Eventually, the site was stripped and redeveloped, with Mr. Hood's old yard making way for industrial units.